There are times when the work still looks the same, but you don't. Meetings unfold, emails go out, results come in. Yet something feels misaligned. You might still be effective. You might even be praised. That doesn't mean you belong in the role you're in. For many professionals, especially those who've experienced burnout, this misalignment doesn't happen overnight. It builds gradually. First as friction, then as depletion, and finally as a kind of emotional distance from the version of success you once pursued. The clarity to name this shift rarely arrives all at once. It comes through reflection, through the long process of noticing which parts of your work still feel alive and which ones ask you to leave yourself behind. Career change is often treated as a detour or disruption. In practice, it can be a form of restoration. When you're no longer willing to trade your values for stability, your priorities begin to reshape themselves. Reflection creates structure when the path forward is uncertain. It gives shape to questions that don't yet have answers, and helps you stay with them long enough to see what matters. Those who take time to reflect tend to move with more intention, less regret, and greater resilience. Even brief moments of pause can reduce emotional exhaustion and reconnect you with a sense of agency. This blog will offer language, structure, and practical guidance for those navigating career change from a place of inner knowing. Whether you're at the first stirrings of change or already taking steps, this work centers on finding a rhythm that matches your own values. The goal is to create a professional life you can inhabit fully, one that supports your health while still drawing on your strengths. Alignment grows from a steady process of discernment, not from chasing someone else's idea of success. Why career changes feel so risky, even when they're right. When your identity has been shaped by a role, leaving it can feel like losing a part of yourself. This is especially true when the role has offered more than income. It might have provided a sense of belonging, structure, or purpose. Leaving a long-held role can unsettle the ways you've organized your time, your value, and your place in the world. Some of the hardest moments come in the space between identities, when the role you left still lingers and the next version of yourself hasn't taken full shape. That space can feel uncertain, especially when the people around you still reflect the old version back. Social cues often reinforce stability, even when that stability no longer supports your well-being. It's not uncommon to grieve a title you no longer want, or to feel exposed when the path ahead isn't yet defined. For mid-career professionals, these feelings can intensify. The higher your previous status or the longer your tenure, the more tightly the role can wrap around your sense of worth. Questions about relevance, age, or income may surface, not because you lack value, but because the culture tends to overvalue linear paths and overlook personal evolution. Alignment rarely arrives as a moment of clarity. It builds slowly, as you start to recognize which parts of your work still feel rooted and which ones have been propped up by habit or expectation. Over time, it becomes easier to see how your skills can move with you, how your experience still holds shape even when the context around it begins to shift. The sense of worth that came from the old role doesn't disappear, but it does begin to reconfigure itself into quieter, more stable, and less tied to performance. Recognizing the signs, it's time for a career shift. Some signals begin softly and spread until they color otherwise manageable days. There is dread before meetings, flatness and reluctance that lingers after tasks. Performance may continue, while presence thins and motivation arrives with less dependable force. These patterns often precede questions about career alignment and what a sustainable path requires. Emotional exhaustion rarely announces itself at once. It seeps in quietly, showing up as a dullness where energy used to rise. Tasks get completed, but they no longer feel connected to impact. The spark that once carried you through begins to flatten, replaced by a weight that lingers long after the work is done. The body often begins carrying strain before the mind finds words for it. Sleep can grow lighter, leaving you less restored in the morning. Recovery after ordinary days may take longer, as though your reserves are slower to return. Tension settles into familiar places such as the shoulders, the jaw, or the stomach, and over time it becomes so common that it feels like part of daily life. Physical discomfort may also weave itself into routine tasks. A dull headache can follow you through meetings, or digestion may falter during stressful weeks. Breathing may tighten during deadlines and linger even after the work is finished. None of these symptoms need to be dramatic to leave an impact. Their persistence slowly changes the way you show up. Decisions feel heavier, concentration slips sooner, and tasks that once fit easily into a day begin to require energy you no longer have to spare. Another layer emerges when meaning loosens from role and contribution feels misrepresented. You may sense you have outgrown the frame that once held your best work. Identity can feel suspended between a familiar chapter and one that remains unnamed. Grief, relief, and uncertainty can coexist while the next direction begins to take form. Recognition takes shape when scattered impressions are gathered with intention. Practices like journaling, structured reflection, or steady conversations can turn vague discomfort into patterns you can trace. Over time, those patterns make decisions less reactive and more grounded in clarity. Paying attention to where your energy rises or drops helps identify conditions that either sustain or deplete you. This kind of noticing highlights which environments allow focus, contribution, and health to exist together. Sharing these observations with peers or mentors can add perspective you may not reach alone. It also surfaces strengths that can move across settings, making new possibilities easier to see. Start with internal clarity before external strategy. The temptation in career change is to begin with movement. Update the resume, refresh the profile, send out applications. These steps look like progress, yet they often bypass the harder question: what am I moving toward? Without clarity, the momentum risks carrying you back into another version of the same strain you wanted to leave. Burnout often reveals not only fatigue but misalignment. The role may still be respectable, even successful, while quietly draining what matters most. Emotional exhaustion deepens when values are compromised for too long, or when work requires the performance of enthusiasm without the presence of meaning. Early reflection helps uncover this mismatch. It asks what you want less of, and what kind of work elect without eroding health. Clarity develops when you pause long enough to examine the conditions that let you function with steadiness. This involves noticing which values hold the most weight, and which ones you can no longer afford to compromise. It also means observing how different kinds of recognition affect you, whether they feel like genuine acknowledgement or empty markers of progress. The process takes time, but the time itself matters. Rushing toward external improvements without this grounding can draw you back into roles that look new on the surface, yet recreate the same depletion underneath. People who pause to clarify their values before changing direction often navigate transitions with more steadiness. The process is less about chasing external markers and more about shaping a role that matches what they can sustain. When clarity guides the choices, new opportunities feel less like escape routes and more like environments where energy, skill, and purpose can coexist. This way of moving shifts career change from reaction to recalibration, protecting against the cycle of leaving one form of misalignment only to enter another. Identify your transferable strengths, even if you're changing fields. Career change often makes people question what will carry forward and what will be left behind. The worry is that years of effort will be erased when stepping into a different field. Yet much of what sustains effective work is not tied to a single industry. Skills that center on communication, leadership, and presence can travel across contexts, shaping trust and impact wherever they are applied. Emotional intelligence is one of the strongest examples. The ability to read a room, manage conflict, or show steady leadership during pressure does not expire when a role changes. These qualities are not extras. They are capacities that determine whether teams cohere or fragment. Professionals who practice self-awareness and empathy often find that their influence extends beyond technical knowledge, creating environments where people feel able to contribute. That ability remains valuable in any setting. Other transferable strengths often stay hidden because they are harder to quantify. Consider the way you make decisions during crisis, how you organize priorities under strain, or how you mentor less experienced colleagues. Each of these reflects judgment, adaptability, and the capacity to hold multiple demands without losing perspective. Even if your next role looks different, these underlying strengths can apply. Reframing your story is part of this process. Instead of presenting experience as a sequence of disconnected roles, you can show how past challenges developed qualities that prepare you for new directions. A teacher may highlight conflict resolution and group facilitation. A healthcare worker may emphasize decision-making under uncertainty. A project manager may focus on cross-functional communication. By naming these threads with clarity, you show continuity rather than rupture. Career change becomes less about abandoning the past and more about carrying forward what proves you are ready for what comes next. Explore, experiment, and expand without pressure to have it all figured out. Career change is rarely a straight line. It often begins with questions too broad to answer through planning alone. The search for clarity becomes less overwhelming when you approach it through exploration. Small experiments can create insight that no amount of abstract thinking can deliver. Informational interviews are one example. Speaking with people who live the work you're considering provides a view that goes beyond job descriptions. These conversations often reveal both the hidden demands and the unexpected satisfactions of a role. They also create connections that can support you later, not through networking for its own sake, but through honest exchange about experience. Practical exposure deepens this process. Shadowing a professional for a day or taking on a short freelance project allows you to see how your strengths translate in practice. Online training or certifications can also widen the frame, offering a way to test interest in a new field without immediate commitment. Each step is a form of rehearsal, giving you feedback on what feels aligned and what does not. Curiosity is central here. Exploration is not a delay or a distraction from progress. It is progress. Career clarity often emerges from repeated cycles of trying, reflecting, and adjusting. The process itself builds adaptability, teaching you to navigate uncertainty with steadier ground beneath you. Adults who engage in experimentation throughout their careers tend to move with more satisfaction when change becomes necessary. They know from practice that identity is not erased in transition. It expands through experience. By embracing curiosity as part of the path, you can reframe career change from a daunting leap into the unknown to a series of informed steps that lead toward a more sustainable direction. Set boundaries around external expectations. Career change does not happen in isolation. Even when the decision feels necessary, the response from others can complicate the process. Friends, colleagues, or family members may project their own fears, interpreting your move as risky or unstable. Some may frame the shift as quitting, as though leaving a familiar role is always a step backward. Others may press for certainty before you have it, asking for detailed plans when you are still exploring. These reactions can amplify doubt at a time when clarity is already fragile. The pressure to reassure others often pulls energy away from the work of honest reflection. It is easy to become caught between your own unfolding direction and the narratives imposed by those around you. This tension gradually erodes confidence and strengthens the belief that stability should be valued above alignment. Naming the dynamics at play helps to create distance from them. You are not responsible for carrying the fears or expectations that others project onto your path. Anchoring into your own reasons for change becomes essential. For many professionals, transition is not reactive, but intentional, a way of moving closer to values that no longer fit within the old role. This perspective reframes career change as growth rather than loss, an act of continuity rather than rupture. By defining your shift as a move toward alignment, you resist the pull to measure yourself through external approval. Boundaries develop through practice, especially when questions come from people you value. It can feel uncomfortable to stand firm without slipping into defense, yet clarity makes it possible. Returning to the reasons behind your transition creates steadiness in the face of doubt. When you hold that ground, outside concerns begin to register differently, as perspectives you can acknowledge without letting them override your direction. Build confidence through action, and not just planning. Planning has its place, but confidence grows most reliably through movement. Even the smallest step signals that change is possible. Updating a resume, reaching out for a brief conversations, or enrolling in a single course begins to shift how you see yourself. These actions provide evidence that you are not only preparing, but already participating in the work of transition. The nervous system responds to action in ways that thought alone cannot replicate. A phone call made, a document drafted, or a new introduction creates a sense of safety and change. The body reads these signals as proof that uncertainty can be managed. Anxiety lessens when forward motion takes shape in tangible form. What feels daunting begins to feel more approachable, not because the challenge has disappeared, but because you have started to engage with it. Narrative coherence develops in this process as well. Naming the shift aloud, even in simple language, helps integrate change into your sense of self. Saying, "I'm in a career transition," moves the experience from a private hesitation to an acknowledged fact. This kind of articulation reduces the gap between identity and action, reinforcing the legitimacy of where you are. Each act, no matter how minor it appears, builds momentum. One conversation may lead to a second. One short project may reveal skills that are ready to be carried forward. Progress is rarely immediate or dramatic. Accumulation of steps creates stability. The path of transition becomes less about enduring uncertainty and more about practicing agency within it. Confidence, in this sense, is not a trait to summon. It is a capacity that strengthens through repetition. Each action taken confirms that change is survivable and that you have the ability to meet it with steadiness. Moving forward with clarity. Career change can feel uncertain, but uncertainty is an emptiness. It's the space where alignment begins to take shape. By slowing down to reflect on what you've outgrown and taking steps that confirm your direction, you create conditions for a future that supports both your work and your well-being. The transition may not follow a straight line, but each step is part of building a life you can inhabit with steadiness and integrity. For new readers, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to stay connected. You can join our mailing list to receive new articles, practical resources, and reminders that you're not moving through this alone. We also host live events where you can hear from others in transition, share your own reflections, and leave with a little more clarity than when you arrived. You're welcome in those spaces. For members, if you're reading this on our member site, you've already made a meaningful investment in your own healing by being here. Thank you for taking the time today to reflect on what alignment means for you. We'd love to see you at our next live event, where members gather to learn, share, and support one another in real time. Your presence strengthens the community and gives others courage to keep going. Consider joining a group conversation or checking in with a peer this week. Connection is part of what makes this path sustainable.